Typically a good hardwood forest has got about 3 age classifications in it, and you can remove the older story and the larger, the older trees, and ensure that you leave the next 2 generations, so that you got to remember when the next fellow comes back in 50 years, he's cutting the tree that was at the 2nd age category, not the one that was number 1. We have a lot of stands here that demonstrate that were logged really heavy in the 50s, and those stands make some of the best cuts of lumber that are left today. In hardwood, grade equals much more value than volume. Grade is upmost. In lots of cases, a 7-foot log is worth more than a 9-foot one, or definitely with veneers, an 8-9 or a 9-6 can be worth more than a 10-6 or an 11-6. Total different approach than what the New Page approach is. The New Page approach has been to clear cut the hardwood, to flatten it. It goes to a low-end product, a bit of logs picked out. In recent years, they've switched to mechanization, and it's been an application of softwood equipment to log hardwood, and that equipment is not big enough. It's not designed to cut hardwood. You get tremendous amount of damage in the felling of it, with butt shatter, with breakage, with too much of a scarf left on the bottom that causes a rip up the side of the log, devaluing it. And then when it comes to trying to process it, when they come to a limb, they can't limb it. It's not much short of a genocide of a resource is what they've actually done. In this new approach with the biomass, the system they're using is going to ensure there is no hardwood sawlog again in those stands. It is basically designed to be a fiber farm for their own interests. And the political point I'll make here is when they eliminate the ability to have a sawlog or a veneer log in the forest, you eliminate the possibility of other interest groups that they see as competition for future control over that land base. A single crop harvest is a harvest that concentrates on getting a specific tree, typically a valuable tree, and as well in that, not only are you taking out that tree, but you're opening up the stand so the smaller ones that are adjacent to it have room for crown expansion. And in a single tree harvest, it's probably the most efficient means of getting the high grade out of the material. It's done hands-on. You're treating each tree as an individual, and you're as close to that tree as you can get, so you see any defects where within a large-scale industrial mechanical harvest, the distance from the tree will prohibit you from being able to identify the defects in the same manner. I do these single tree harvests mainly with a chainsaw and a cable skidder, and the main reason I choose a cable skidder over, I seldom ever use my forwarder, but the cable skidder, it gives me the ability to pull in maybe 100 or 150 feet of cable if there's only one tree in a young stand that I see as my target. Could be a variety of reasons. One is high value, and the other one is if I see that it's overpowering a lot of young growth that can't really get the light it should, then it enables me to pull it out without damaging. You do not have to drive to the tree as you do with a forwarder or a grapple skidder, and that's your greatest advantage.
And New Page is proposing to use the heavy mechanized equipment that's specific to softwood harvesting.
That's typically what they've done. They've reapplied their softwood machinery to hardwood stands, and we'll see later today, it's quite visible that they're not able to handle those types of trees effectively when you see what's left, simply because they can't take the limbs off them, where with a chainsaw system it's done in a short time. Mainly what they're using here is a feller buncher ahead of a processor. And the feller buncher, the majority of them only have a 20-inch cut. So what you'll see later today is when they go to cut a tree off that's over 20 inches, you'll see where it shatters it on the other side, and we call it a barber chair, and they will end up breaking a slab off it that could be sticking up 6 inches, or it could be 2 feet, or it could be 6 feet, which renders that log, losing a great deal of value. And when those heads are reaching their maximum cutting diameter, after they've hit 2/3 of their maximum cutting diameter, they lose momentum, they lose speed with that saw head. So then you're trying to push that tree over, basically is what it comes down to. And in that process, you cause shatter in the tree. It'll split and you'll tear it. And when the processor follows that buncher, if there's any kind of heavy limbs, which you'll see later today, and they don't have to be really heavy, they don't have the ability to pound the limbs off them or to complete the harvesting of that particular piece of wood. We'll get a look at that type of thing a little later. There was 1,248 trees rather, that were harvested on 65 acres. The average return to the landowner on that was $436.12 per acre, which calculates roughly $30.37 per ton in stumpage, which consisted of 482 tons of sawlog, 62 tons of veneer, and 388 tons of firewood. What I've tried to do here is basically to duplicate what was done in 1950, and we did it in 2004, and it's quite safe to look at this is to say that this stand could sustain that same type of harvest in another 50 years, and yet it's still a living ecosystem. It's a living forest. As you can see here, you know, the advantages of skidding by comparison to forwarding, you've got pretty well 100% yellow birch regeneration. And if you look up, the irony in this is that in this stand it was only consisted of 10% yellow birch. But by using a skidding method rather than a forwarding method, you will get pretty well exclusive yellow birch regen. Yellow birch is certainly a better tree in terms of wildlife. And although it doesn't bring the highest price per board foot, a yellow birch stand will out-yield dollar-wise a maple stand any particular time. In this stand, with the value we've taken out of it, and what's left, it's still densely stemmed. It would make an ideal stand for what NewPage would like to do from a biomass perspective, because the logs are out of it. You'd be looking at a yield of from 20 to 30 ton per acre, more apt to be 30 ton because it's very thick. And at $2.50 a ton, I feel that type of a forest that is grown vigorously, it's healthy, that it has a lot more value than $75 an acre. You can talk to any of the bigger contractors and they will tell you that what has taken place is we're just decimating, you know, it's a duplication of what went on with the fishery, is what we're doing to our forests. There's one right there, 240 bucks, American. That's a good stick.
For one tree?
And $240 for one log. That is 10 foot long with a 17-inch top, yellow birch. You get some picture, Karen, here of Ocean Lake today where we're going, right? Probably a 3-mile vantage point looking down on it. Here we've just got an example of using softwood equipment in a hardwood stand that it can't be harvested. You've got a 10-inch top, you've got there's still a 7-foot saw log in it, and the overall length of that piece of wood that is completely usable is 14 feet. So basically 50% of the bole of that tree is left. And you see what's going to happen to it, it's going to rot. This piece of wood we're looking at, it's got a 10-inch top, and I've just measured 14 feet of workable wood in this. It has a short log in it of 7 feet. Doesn't have a great deal of commercial value, let's say $3. But just an example of what happens when you use softwood equipment to log hardwood. It can't be completely manufactured. In here you'll see there's the reason why you come to a limb, and any single grip head is not going to pound through those kind of limbs, so they're left in the bush. Here we have the 15-inch top, and you've got at least 24 feet of top quality biomass or hardwood pulp in that stem. But as you can look at it, a mechanical head won't cut it, so it's left in the bush to rot. Here we have a 16-inch top on a yellow birch. I'm going to run the tape out. I can't get it at all because my tape's only 16 feet. And the piece of wood that's left here, well, right now I'm in excess of 16 feet, and there's still
there's still a fair amount of wood left beyond that. And that's also left because softwood gear won't cut hardwood. Here we have an example of a large yellow birch that somebody cut with a buncher. They didn't have the power to get the whole thing off, and it barber chaired on them. So another case that just demonstrates that they can't utilize what's in that tree even if they try to. This tree would have only been a seedling when this lot was cut 50 years ago, selectively. If I was to log this selectively today, that tree, one of my main priorities is not to touch it or discard or anything else. That's the tree that should be left for the fellow that's going to come 50 years behind me. Where across the road, that tree was just flattened. Even worse, all these across the road in this size range that are 3.5 inches at breast height, and that tree's similar in age as well. That tree's pushing 50 years old. Those are all still flattened, and what's in it? Maybe $1 worth of wood. This can sustain this type of harvest on an ongoing basis. Quite a contrast to what's across the road. Take a little in order to make it work at the time, maximize its value, and ensure that you leave something behind that will be equally as good as what you walked into. Here we're on a piece of property of Scott Cook's that's on the south side of Salmon River that was clear cut for hardwood in 1966-67. As you can see, what we have here is basically nothing but regeneration of red maple, 95%. And this property was clear cut in such a way there was no shade trees left, and obviously the ground wasn't scarified in any great deal because there's no yellow birch regeneration or any tolerant hardwood on the ground. Basically, this is what the end result will be of the forest as a result of the clear cuts that Storer are doing on those tolerant hardwood ridges that we had filmed north of Ocean Lake. This is what your end result will be in about another 40 odd years. There's little commercial value stuff in it other than biomass or fuel wood. And the species we have here, it doesn't matter what you do with it, whether you thin it or you can do what you please, and it'll never make a sawlog. It's nothing but bottom-in material. And actually, if I was looking to grow a fiber farm in order to grow biomass, this would be the end result I'd be looking to achieve. The other thing, from a wildlife perspective, red maple is at the bottom of the list in terms of wildlife habitat, where yellow birch is our dominant species that's preferred by grouse. And I do see in the management of these public lands, one of the points that is stressed is to manage it for wildlife, both grouse, deer, and moose. And yellow birch is the preferred species of all those species. So I don't really see a lot of benefit here, like in the local area, to the community or to the forest itself, other than the long-term growth of biomass with this type of past harvesting practice that is still being carried out today in the tolerant hardwood stands. Okay, here we're in a stand that was cut in 1957, in the winters of 1958. As you can see ahead of me, right here we got some stumps, the old stumps when this was logged. Selectively, it was cut for grade hardwood. As you can look here right now, you can see the regeneration of this, little 5-inch birch that is like second growth. That's that's your future crop tree. This is stuff that would have been basically just a seed in the ground when it was logged before. And at the same time, you can look behind me, and you can see a nice yellow birch here that's 12 inches at 13 inches at breast height. But this is the kind of tree that should be harvested today. And the one thing you want to see here as well is that the yellow birch regeneration is certainly the one is the most beneficial as far as wildlife goes. And it's a diversified forest. You got a little bit of balsam fir, you got a little bit of red maple. I can stand here and I can look right here and I can see a large sugar maple to my left. So There is quite a diversification in this forest in terms of age. We've got approximately 3 different age classes that I can see. You've got the very young ones that are 25 years old, and you've got the 35 to 50 year old, and you've got the 100 year plus old. And in a selective harvest, you'd be targeting the trees that are over the 100 years and trying to ensure you leave the young stuff that's as unscarred as possible, so that this can be done in another 50 years in a sustainable manner. This is what we have in Guysborough County in terms of the original Acadian forest, which would consist of largely yellow birch, hard maple, soft maple, some beech. Here you have about as good as straight a quality of tree as what you'll find. 2 veneer logs in it. You get a butt log there that's easy worth $250, and a second cut that's worth about $125. This tree is the largest yellow birch that I've seen in Nova Scotia, and in this entire plateau west of the Isaacs Harbour, or east of the Isaacs Harbour River. I know there is none bigger, and that tree is approximately 600 years old. This is as good as they come. This is a birch that, if you recall in some of the last work we did on the Stora mechanical jobs, they'd have to hit that about 3 times to bring it down, basically destroy it. The tree weighs about a ton, so if it's improperly manufactured, it could end up in the chipperwood pile, which would yield the province about $2.50. And the butt log on this, a 10'6", 9/6 to a 10'6", that will top about 30 inches. You're getting in the vicinity of a $700 to $800 stick here. That's as good as we get in Nova Scotia. It's as good as it comes. It's definitely in the vicinity of 375 to 400 years old. So, and as I will state again, this is a stand that's never been cut. It is one of the few remaining stands of virgin birch in Guysborough County. Ideally, I think it would be probably in the best interest of the community that this stand is left intact. And if it needed to be harvested, it would be done in a very select manner on a crop tree cut with a very small removal based upon very high-end value. That money could be redirected, into some other community venture, then I think it would be maybe well spent.
That's hardwood that was cut on Crown lands about 4 years ago.
Hardwood that was cut in Crown lands 4 years ago. So we are, in fact, on Crown land, you say. Where exactly are we, Scott?
On the Loon Lake Road.
Loon Lake Road, at the back of Loon Lake, eh?
Yeah, back of Donahoo's Lake.
And this hardwood belongs to who?
Store of Forest Industries.
My goodness. And why do you think they haven't bothered to use it?
No idea.
Now, you own a sawmill. Would you have liked to do something with this wood?
Yes, I offered to buy it, but they wouldn't sell it.
Well, that's too bad. How many cords of wood do you think that there might be up here that's just going to waste?
Probably 800 to 1200 cords, somewhere in that area, 1000 cords probably.
My goodness. And what does Stora pay the government for this?
I've heard $2.50 a cord stumpage. Now, if they don't haul it, I suppose it's nothing.
Oh, I suppose, yes. So it really hasn't cost them very much. No. But even if they did pay for it, it would only cost $2 or $3 a cord. And what you said you would have been willing to pay them, even with it half rotten, at least last year. You said you offered them how much? 40?
It's 40 for some piles and 20 for the ones that were pretty rotten.
Really rotten. Yes. My goodness. Well, it would have been worth Stora's while to take you up on that offer. Why did they not? They would have made money hand over fist.
We're interested.
That seems a very strange arrangement. And I suppose that if you can't get wood, then there's a lot of people going to be laid off from your mill.
Yeah, it would be probably half a dozen work around.
They'd work around, and if there's no wood, there's just no jobs for these people.
What we've done in this country, we've In the forest industry, we have traditionally gave control of the resource to the lowest end user. And when you do that, anybody, with any business sense is going to try and accommodate their facility. So if you're the bottom end user, where's the best place for it? You have another motive of gain there. You have what to me is an uncalculable gain. I don't know what their margins are within. But they're not really interested in servicing a sawmill or a veneer mill. They're interested in serving themselves. And when that hits the bottom end of the pile, if the operator splits a big hardwood, it doesn't mean much that it went from $300 a ton to, a $22.50 a ton product. Not when you're the one that's using it. The problem that I see with it is within the education system, in terms of training professional foresters and technicians. They seem to believe that for hardwood to be a viable product, it had to be standing in the same uniform sizes and diameters as what we have balsam fir in this country, and ironically that doesn't happen anywhere. It doesn't exist. What they did when they started to play with hardwood management, and I'll use that term back about 15 years ago, they just took the book on spruce and they reapplied it to hardwood. Well, it doesn't work. It's a different species, it's a different forest, a different ecosystem. And they will admit today, a lot of them, that it was a mistake. But at that point, oh no, that was like the Bible. That was right. It was nothing but a lack of common sense. One thing I do see that there is a huge need for in Eastern North America, and this comes from large landowners that I've worked with in Northern Ontario. One landowner has 110,000 acres, an American interest group. And they were totally blown away that they can't find the trained people that are able to do this. I really see one use that could really be a great benefactor to the local community in a long-term basis, and you're going to guarantee you get the product out of the forest, would be an education facility that would train people to do this, which there is a demand for all over that is not able to be met. NewPage will tell you, I'll guarantee you they will recognize the fact there's not the trained people to get that product out, and it's part of the reason that this forest is miscut, that it is not reaching the best end point of where it should be going. But for something like this to work, the first thing you have to do is break the deadlock that they have on controlling that. And they have to open their eyes and realize that they're not the only player in this game. And they have to realize that there's those of us that think that should be looked upon as a piece of property that's got value to the community. It's a means of giving the people some control over their destiny, because you would be giving them access to some control over their resource. The way I've always viewed this is the product should be tendered. If they're going to cut it, it should be bid, it goes to the highest bidder. And I will tell you this, if they were prepaying the true value of those trees before they went to harvest it, it wouldn't be miscut. It wouldn't be split up the butt. It wouldn't be butchered, because they would have a vested interest in it. What's happened here is there's no accountability. It's something they paid nothing for. So if they do destroy it, it only goes into the bottom end of the cycle, which, ironically, they're the benefactor of. If it doesn't justify sustainability within the equation at the present time of harvest, it should be left alone until somebody else comes along and has enough ingenuity to be able to do it, incorporate it within the harvest, and not make it a public liability. You're taking an asset and turning it into a liability. Once the damage is done, you can't rectify it. It's done, it's finished, it's over. And case being made again, if they had to pay the value before they went in there, now then you have an insurance that they're going to get it right. But with their own accountability, they're accountable basically to nobody. We just have more duplication of the same kind of action. So I think my point is kind of made there. I hope it can be understood.